Record of Fugitives, January 1856, from the papers of Sidney Howard Gay. Read by Frank Blissett. January 4th, 1856. Samuel Scott and his wife, Sassafras Neck, Cecil County, Maryland. James McGee, master, and widow Leslie, mistress of wife, walked to Middleton 12 miles, and took the cars for Philadelphia. $8.50. Thomas Jones, born Robert Brown, Martinsburg, Berkeley County, Virginia. Colonel Amtramck, Jefferson County, master, hired out to Mr. Jones, house servant. Left Christmas night, hired a horse to cross the Potomac, and rode 30 miles, where he turned him loose, and walked on for 2 days and a night, till he reached Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Thomas was bred a house servant, and has been waiter and cook in a hotel. He had a wife and 4 children, with whom he has always lived till 5 weeks ago, when they were all sent to Richmond to be sold. They belonged to one Conrad of Martinsburg, who sold them because the rest of his slaves, who were all of one family, did not agree with the mother. Thomas seems a very respectable man, and is quite intelligent. Makes no complaint of the treatment he has always received, has had food enough, plenty of good clothing. But this cruel stroke bitterly upset him, and he determined to reach a country where he could work for himself, with a hope of reclaiming his wife and children. Alexander Munson takes the name of Samuel Jones, from Chestertown, Maryland, aged 18. Freeman Woodland, master. He left more than a year ago, and has been living in various places in Pennsylvania, last with Dr. Hammer Charleston. His father lives in Wilmington, a free man, and came for him a few days since to send him northward, Woodland having recently been in search of him at Harrisburg, where some colored people had been arrested, and in Wilmington and Philadelphia. When Samuel first escaped, he was so near being retaken that as he walked out of one door of his father's house at Wilmington, his master walked in at another with 2 polices. Sam's mother belonged to Woodland's first wife, who left her free after a term of years, and her children to be free at 21. Some others, cousins of Sam's, left in the same way, the villain sold to Alabama within a year or 2 of the expiration of their term of service. Just before Sam left, a little boy of his master's told him that he heard his father tell his mother that he meant to sell Sam, so Sam left. Sent all to Syracuse, $15. January 17th. William Henry Larison, from Newark County, Delaware, went to Wilmington on foot on Saturday the 12th. Sent forward by Thomas Garrett, was married a month ago, but his master proposing to sell him, and the overseer giving him permission to go to Wilmington, he improvised the opportunity which he had long wished for to escape. January 18th. A company of 6 arrived, 2 of whom were from Alexandria, and the rest from Virginia. The 2 first were man and wife. They got first to Washington, and then went into Maryland, on their way to Philadelphia. But the wife was taken ill, and they remained in the house of some friendly colored people whom they happened to fall in with. The name of the husband was George Graham, changed to Henry Washington, and they belonged to the widow Beverly. The other 4 were Barnaby Gringby and his wife, Mary Elizabeth Gringby, and Frank Wanzer, a single man, and Emily Foster, a single woman. She belonged to Townsend McBee. This party left home during the Christmas holy days, hiring a carriage and a pair of horses for the journey, and being accompanied by 2 friends on horseback. They traveled for a day or 2 without question, when, unfortunately, they found they had strayed a short distance from the right road, and the 2 horsemen went ahead to make inquiry. They stopped at a mill and asked the road to Pennsylvania. The miller told them they must go no further, he, of course, presuming them to be fugitives. They returned to their companions, and all went on together. Arriving in a few moments at the mill, the miller seized the horses' heads and attempted to stop them. One of the men presented a pistol, and he let them pass. They had not gone far, however, before they found themselves pursued, and they were soon overtaken by 7 horsemen. These surrounded the carriage and called upon the travelers to surrender. They threatened and persuaded by turns, but proceeded to no violence. The men refused to stop, and being armed, which they did not disguise, their pursuers were evidently unwilling to meddle with them. They concluded, at length, to take to the horses, leave the carriage in the road. They immediately ungeared, their friends on horseback aiding them, and the whites looking on, evidently afraid to interfere. Then they all mounted, a man and a woman on each horse, and started as fast as they could urge their horses, their pursuers surrounding them. Present, the single horseman and one of the couples took to the woods, the other keeping to the road. In a few moments the couple came out of the woods, then joined the other in the road, the whites for some reason having all taken after the 2 men. Then again they all rode into the woods and concealed themselves till evening. About 9 o'clock they started as before, riding double, and took to the road again. They had not gone far before they came to a house, and the inmates hearing them pass, called to them to stop. Not obeying these orders, they were fired upon, but fortunately were not hit. Their companions they have never seen nor heard of since, and presume that they were captured. They rode on till daylight, then dismounting, they turned their horses' heads the way they came, gave them a slap to start them homeward, and fled into the woods. The rest of the way they traveled on foot, and met with no further interruption. The feet of one of the men were frozen from the exposure, for, of course, they were without the shelter of a roof for several days. Sent these and the man who preceded them to Canada. Expenses $28.75. Postscript, January 22nd. The Syracuse Chronicle of the 19th thus notices this party and their arrival in that city. Fresh arrival of fugitives. We had the pleasure of seeing 7 very intelligent, fine-appearing fugitives this morning, fresh from the land of the peculiar institution, the blessings of which they seemed not all to appreciate. 2 of them, a young married couple, left in October last, and have just arrived, having been delayed by sickness and the dangers of their wearisome journey. One was from Delaware, the other 4 from the same neighborhood. This party, when it left, consisted of 4 males and 2 females, all young people. They came on in good order, for a time, in carriages without opposition. But before reaching the borders of the Free States, they were attacked by a party of 6 whites. They took their horses from the carriages and mounted them, 2 of the men taking each a female behind him, and the other 2 going singly. Those with the females escaped, but the men who were alone were probably captured, as they have not been heard from. The 7 arrived at Loggins last night, where they were cared for, and are probably now on their way to the land of the free. 2 of them were married today. The following paragraph from the Tribune of the 23rd last probably refers to the same party, though there are some discrepancies in the statement, but none that might not naturally enough occur. Escape of fugitives, exciting chase, unfortunate capture of one. A paper published in the town of Frederick, Maryland, called The Examiner, gives a description of a late stampede of slaves from that vicinity. It appears that 6 of them, 4 men and 2 women, having 2 spring wagons and 4 horses, came to Hood's Mill on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, near the dividing line between Frederick and Carroll counties, on Christmas Day. After feeding their animals, one of them told Mr. Dixon whence they came. Believing them to be fugitives, he spread the alarm, and some 8 or 10 persons gathered around to arrest them. But the negroes, drawing revolvers and bowie knives, kept their assailants at bay until 5 of the party succeeded in escaping in one of the wagons, and as the last one jumped on a horse to flee, he was fired at, and the load took effect in the small of his back. After going a few rods, he reeled and fell to the ground, when he was pounced upon and secured. How he was used by his captors we know not, but humanity shudders at the probable result. January 25th. A man was brought to the office who declared himself to be a fugitive from near Fredericksburg, Virginia. There were some discrepancies in his story, however, which made it doubtful. Put him in the way, however, of being shipped for a sea voyage, which he said he was willing to take. Paid to get his trunk for him, 37 cents. January 28th. Mary Jeffers and her 2 daughters belonged to Joshua Craig of Bohemia Manor, Maryland. Her master and mistress permitted her to leave them with these 2 children about 6 years ago, and since that time she has lived in Philadelphia. Subsequently, she brought a little boy, whom she has left in New Jersey. After the death of the old people, the legal title to Mary and the girls vested in their 2 sons and a daughter. Recently, a rumor reached Mary that one of the sons, now a resident of Wilmington, was going to New Orleans, and that he meant to recover her and her 2 daughters. She did not believe the story, but a week ago yesterday, Monday, she saw him come to the house door accompanied by an officer, and apprehending their errand, she fled to a neighbor's. They searched the house, and Mr. Craig, saying that Mary and the daughters were his property, and meant to take them. This Mary overheard him say before she went out of the gate. Fortunately, the daughters were out. The pursuers searched the house in the rear, but the frightened woman, fearing what they might do, had gone further to the house of a lady with whom she once lived as service. She remained there till night, and then went to a friend's. In the course of the day the children found, and through the week they remained in concealment together, and all that time their old home was constantly watched. Friends brought them some of their clothes, piece by piece, but everything else, in the anxiety to save themselves, they abandoned, and they have been probably, or will be, sold by the landlord. Mary was in great distress at the ruthless breaking up of her home, the danger of being taken with the children to the South, reduced again to slavery. Her husband, who is also a fugitive slave, is in California. Sent them to Logan at Syracuse. Expenses, $13.39. January 31st, Henry Chambers, born James Green, William Rybold, master, and John Chambers, born Daniel Chambers, Thomas Murphy of Sassafras Neck, Cecil County, Maryland, left Christmas Day and have been in Pennsylvania since. A week before Christmas, being at Wilmington, Delaware, with his master's team, Henry inquired of a colored man how he could get clear, and was told to come to Wilmington and go to Frank Flint. Did not leave then because he chose to take his master's team home, but left on Christmas Day with his brother. John Henry belonged to Anthony Rybold, brother of William, left a little before Christmas with a companion, John Fisher, belonging to the same man. Sent them all to Syracuse, $17.40. That was Record of Fugitives, January 1856, from the papers of Sidney Howard Gay. Read by Frank Blissett.